Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for watching another one of my shows, William Wallace for America. With me today is Paul Glasco. He's got a lot of credentials in the Second Amendment industry, and I want to brag about him because I'm so happy to have him on my show because, as you all know, I'm a Second Amendment guy myself. Has his book, How to Make a Monster, which we're going to talk a lot about today. He does videos on YouTube about guns and the gun business and the gun industry, which I think you're going to find real interesting because it's not just about guns. It's about the advocacy that he does for gun rights. And we're also going to talk about, like I said, his book, but part of his industry, Legally Armed America, his gun rights activism. And Paul, what else do you have on your mind?
Man, it just that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I mean, I've got a lot going on, and I'm very much appreciate you for having me on the show.
Well, I tell you, when I met you in Lafayette, I was really impressed. I started to stammer a little bit because there's so much about you to get out, and sometimes I'm too eager to say it in the introduction. When the interview that we're about to do, I think it's gonna be the long play, so to speak. But I think when people hear what you information you have, they're not only going to be interested in your book, but in your advocacy, which I've gotten to know from meeting you in Lafayette. And it's just really interesting stuff. It's not just, we have the right to go buy guns, go buy them. You really delve into a lot of the facts and also the legalities and how they all work together to not only protect our rights and give us our rights, but also why citizens should be aware of what's going on in the gun industry. Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah, I think so. Probably uh, the biggest thing that I have always had issues with politicians in general, but laws more specifically, is that it's no coincidence and it's no accident when people write these bills that they're written in language, and they try to make it sound like old English language to make it sound like they're being true to our founding fathers when they're absolutely not.
Right.
They're wording this stuff as difficult to read and understand as they possibly can. And in a previous career of mine, I worked in contracts. I worked for a utility company that's actually down in your area, Entergy Corporation. I was a regional manager for them, and we actually I was over the contracts area, so I got used to reading garbage that was meant to either confuse people or to distract them so that they didn't realize what was really written in there. So for years now, because it's true to my heart, I've taken a lot of these bills, and I figured I already had a platform on YouTube, and I already was reading a lot of these bills anyway. So why not take a lot of that information and put it out there? Because I always had the feeling whenever I would start talking, either around the water cooler or whatever, about various bills, that I found that people would blow it off like, oh, yeah, I don't understand anything they're saying. So people would actually ignore some of these bills, not call senators, congressmen, or whatever. I know people have their own opinions that voting doesn't matter, but it does. So we're sitting oops, these
Yeah.
senators and whatnot, they were going, I'm here.
Yeah.
So they were, these people I felt like were voting on bills on our behalf, not voting the way we wanted them to vote because they didn't hear from anybody. So that's why I sort of pushing a lot more information out there to try to get people more educated. Not that I'm smarter than other people, it's just that I understood that lingo. Again,
That's right.
it's not an accident that they make this stuff hard to understand. And that's probably where I have been the most excited with especially my YouTube channel, which we're on Fox 29 down here in Louisiana and Texas.
Okay.
But I mean, a lot of people, I noticed them starting to catch on. So now when I put videos out about bills, people are like waiting with bated breath to see that because they're like, man, either I don't have time. Everybody's got families. It's
Yeah,
difficult when you
exactly.
have. I mean, a bill is 238 pages long. Not everybody has the time to go through that. I mean, whenever I take anything, I'm typically going to highlight my own notes and
Yeah.
make my own notes for various things that need to be spoken on more specifically. And sometimes I'll take things out of some of these bills and do a little bit more research on them. So I feel like, yeah, what you're talking about from an advocacy standpoint, I'm proud of where my channel has gone because I feel like it's truly educating people on things that they either don't or don't want to have take the time to understand about bills. Because I mean, let's face it, these politicians are so notorious for trying to slide things through, hoping
Exactly.
that we don't catch it or understand it. And I mean, I feel like a lot of us, not just me, there's a lot of guys out there on YouTube and on the internet who are doing a really good job, I feel like, of trying to get the word out there and simplifying things where more people can understand it.
I think elected officials are looking more at the inner workings of what the deals are inside the bill instead of the bill as a whole on what it really does as a whole.
Right.
I mean, I'll say bridge to nowhere because people understand that, but a legislator might look at the bill and go, "Hey, this little part in the bill, it takes away, arm braces."
Yep.
And I like that because my constituency wants them outlawed. And
That's
but
right.
they don't look at all the other 10 things that are in that bill and how they work together to make it one really bad bill.
Right.
And so while it might be a good bill, but there's one thing in it that's bad that they still vote for. I don't think they look at the whole thing as a whole.
Well, no, you're exactly right. In fact, I'm usually pretty good about catching stuff in these bills, and I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that one of the videos that I have out there, and it's so weird because I don't know if it's been ratcheted back by YouTube. YouTube has a really good does a really good job of making sure videos like mine don't get seen, and that's not a conspiracy theory. I mean,
I'm
it's
censored. I'm censored till December.
oh wow,
Yeah,
gosh.
I got videos up there, but they won't allow me to put up any new videos, and they've taken 12 or 13 of them down.
Well, then you're making my point. So
Yeah.
I put a video out. Gosh, it's probably been a couple of months now since that gun control bill went through.
Mhm.
And I was shocked that about a week or two after the bill went through, I was reading through it again, just making some notes for a show that I was going to be doing. And I was blown away that they had snuck in a portion to the bill that allowed for middlemen and pharmaceutical companies to continue to essentially double dip in their own industry, where middlemen could help set the price of drugs to drug manufacturers, go to the pharmacy companies and negotiate the price there. They're
Mhm.
negotiating on two ends. They're
That's right.
negotiating on what it's being bought for and what it's being sold for, and they're buying it for less and selling it for more and keeping all the money. I mean,
Right.
that's in any other industry that's illegal. So I put a video out on that, and it's funny because that's my point to that is that was snuck into that bill. When I say in the 11th hour, I think I was reading the bill in the 11th hour and I didn't
Yeah.
catch that. So it's stuff like that I'm like, it's not even gun related.
Right.
This was the bill that they were standing on a hill beating their chests about. We finally passed a gun control bill. And inside of it, to me, the worst thing about it, besides the red flag gun laws, of course, is the very fact that we're going to allow pharmaceutical companies to continue to bilk everybody out there in this state of a bad economy where we're at right now.
Exactly. Well, we're going to talk about some of those red flag laws, and that we'll touch on this time. But we're going to do some more shows together. I'd like you to tell people about your book, How to Make a Monster. I think that is really interesting. I've looked through it. I'll be honest, I have not had a chance to read all of it, but I've looked through it and I've read some of the, I'll read parts of chapters and stuff like that. Some of this is scary.
Yeah.
Some of this,
Yeah.
I say, is scary in a way that if you're not paying attention, what you expose in this book is how they're getting away with it.
Yeah.
That's the right way
Yeah.
to say it.
No, that's exactly right. And I will say this before I say anything else about the book, because I don't know if your viewers, I know they don't know me, so I don't expect everybody to take my word for it. I literally have, let me count them real quick, 254 footnotes in the book. So
Wow. Yeah.
people can research whatever they want to. If they disagree or they don't believe what I'm saying in here, anytime I make any kind of data point in the book, I have footnoted that. So you can go back, look and see what I
You
put
got a
in
way
there.
to back it up.
That's correct. Because I knew what would happen. I offered this book to a lot of the anti-gun industry out there. I offered them free copies that I would send to them because I felt like this was important enough for for them to read. None of them took me up on it, of course, but I knew that if anybody did, and I've had some interviews, one by a liberal company that they felt like my interview was maybe 5 minutes because they couldn't poke holes in anything. Because every time they asked me about something, I would ask them what page was that on so that I could go find the footnote to tell their viewers to go look at the footnote.
I
And they
love
didn't
it.
like that. So that's the whole, I made sure that I covered my own tail in this. But this book right here, it's like everything else in today's day and time. You have to mention or post disclaimers because you're going to hurt somebody's feelings or
Yeah.
somebody's going to take something out of context or whatever. I probably put about 15 or 20 different times in here where I state that, look, these three things that I'm mentioning do not create what I call rampage killers, which I
Right.
mean, for your viewers' case, this book is written about rampage killers, what the media more specifically calls mass shooters or school shooters. The book is specifically on that. And I remember the reason why I even got to this probably about 2017. I think, no, I'm sorry, 2018, I believe it was, because I think it was after the Parkland shooting in Florida. I just remember sitting back and asking one of the most obvious questions. And it was so obvious, but I know we ask ourselves that, but we're so busy in our daily lives. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, there's got to be some commonalities out here. You hear every single time you have one of these rampage killings,
Yeah, right. Exactly.
somebody says, "Oh, he was on our radar," or "We knew about him," or "Oh, it doesn't
Yep.
surprise me." All these things. So I actually looked, and I didn't know what the commonalities were. I just said, "There's got to be something." You hear it all the time, the same things. So I started digging at a really, really high level. Now, this was only for a small segment that I was doing on my show. So I was
Right.
trying to put together a 10 or 15-minute video. And boy, when I started digging, I was like, wait a minute, and that's where the only illustration in this entire book is, and of course, now that I need it, I'm not going to be able to find it, but it shows intersecting circles of where the true, I feel like, rampage killers come from. And that
Yep.
is
Bullied, broken homes, and meds.
exactly. And I mean, I found that overwhelmingly that kept coming up. So it's kind of a chronological order thing. Obviously, the person has to be born. And look, there's sociopaths and psychopaths who are born. But one of the first things that I learned about, and look, guys, just so you know, I did so much research. I have stacks of books. I contacted people. I mean, the DSA, I forget what the rest of the number is. It's the big catalog that has all the drugs in it. It talks about what each drug
Oh
does.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah.
So I did a ton of research. And it took me 2 years to write this book. So I realized that, okay, these people are born, and a person can be born with different types of attributes that would lend them to not being mentally all there, but they can grow up in a good, positive household and they can be treated right throughout school and everything and go on to lead perfectly normal lives. Millions of people do that every single day. Not everybody is born perfectly mentally capable.
Correct.
So I found that once you had a person who was born, the first thing that happened, if they're in a broken home, that's where a lot of it starts. 80% of people in prison come from fatherless homes. And it's usually fatherless homes, but broken homes in general.
Yep.
It can be, a single parent home, I guess is what I'm saying. It could be somebody who was sexually abused in the home while both parents are there. They could be mentally abused, physically abused. Something is breaking that home, is what I'm saying. So then you have that. So now you have this child, and they're still a child at that point, who now they're pushed out into the world from a broken home. Well, now they're subconscious. They're kind of a loner. Now, guess what? They're picked on. They're bullied. So now they become either depressed or they're ADD or something like that. Now, guess what? The teacher, and I mentioned this in the book, I have a whole chapter on the No Child Left Behind. That policy came out, and that was one of the biggest boosts of the drug boom of getting so many of these children on these psychotropic drugs, because these teachers now were being incentivized not to have these children make good grades, but to pass a test. That's all they
Wow.
had. They didn't care what the grades on the report card was, because
Mhm.
now these teachers were getting graded, and I'm talking about their paychecks tied
Yep.
monetarily to it.
Exactly.
Well, look, I'm not trying to say that teachers are crooked, but anytime you enter into an incentive program where
Mhm.
maybe not even the incentive is enough to incentivize them, but the disincentive to punish them because these kids are not making the good enough scores on these tests is enough for
Right.
a teacher to sit back and go, I just lost my raise again this year because these kids can't pass this test. They're not making the scores that I needed to make. These are people who are putting food on their table. Now, I'm not saying it's okay to be corrupt, but these are grown adults
Mhm.
who are having their own pay compromised because they can't have their children can't pass these tests. So what do? Now they start teaching just to that test, right?
Correct.
And so not only that, they see a child who's a little bit slow of a learner and learns a little bit differently. Hey, they need ADHD medicine or they need
Yeah.
whatever. So now we start over medicating these kids. This was not a coincidence. You can look at No Child Left Behind, and the number of kids on drugs goes up exactly the same time frame as all this No Child Left Behind started.
Unbelievable.
So I mean, there's
This,
some bad things that take place in that world.
yeah, and look, and I don't know that they tie drugs in to be able to make kids bad for these crimes. That might be what some people might want to think that we're saying.
Nope.
However, when you look at the repercussions, when you look at the outcomes of over medicating our children, it's not just in mass shootings; it's all over the board. It's in
Yep.
drug addiction. It's
That's
in
right.
now children are reliant on medication
Yep.
instead of I read an article a long time. It talked about how our children they're either farmers or they're entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Now there's of
Yeah.
course there's combinations, and it talked about the ADHD medication.
That's right.
That some children just naturally able to sit down there and relax and study. They're the farmers.
Yep.
They're more subdued, and then there's children that are more hyper. They're like the ADHD kids they're more like the entrepreneurs. They're always out there going to get it. You just have to learn how to work with them
That's
instead
right.
of over medicating them. In this case, you feel that that's one small contribution to mass shootings, correct?
It is. And just as a disclaimer, again, I want to make it very, very clear. Chapter 6, you will notice I use the word that you so graciously used, over medicating. I'm not saying that
Yeah,
medication is the
right.
problem. It's
Exactly.
over medicating these children.
Right,
That's the
exactly.
problem. And if people want to be in denial, that's fine. I understand that. But not one, not two, not five. All of these psychotropic mood altering drugs have what the FDA lists as a black box warning. The black box warning, easy for me to say,
Yeah.
has to be put on any drug that causes suicide, homicide, anxiety, any kind of manic type disorders, anything like that. And that's on every single one of these. So we sit back and we watch a child who was from a bad home. The kid was bullied. And look, I'm not using none of this as an excuse for somebody
Right.
shooting a school up.
Exactly. I
But
mean, it
there
goes back to
are,
those broken homes.
that's right. That's right. I mean, we have to understand that all of these things are literally the perfect storm. It's not a coincidence that all the people that I talk about in this book have those exact same things. And again, I back it up. I mean, there's resources in there that show that. So it may not be the cause of that, but if we're going to be honest with ourselves and say we really want to get a handle on all these quote mass shootings, we need to stop blaming the guns and realize that there's a whole lot of things that maybe we're not doing right as parents with our children. And nobody wants to point the finger at themselves. I get that. I'm not
Yeah,
the perfect parent either, but it is a fact that these parents have a role in this.
and it's something you've alluded to when we talking about families. In your chapter, you talk about broken homes or broken families. And look, we all both understand, there's going to be divorce, there's going to be broken
Sure.
families, but it ties back to not only conservative values,
Yep.
not only family values, not only American values, not even biblical values, but parents' hands are being tied in so many ways to teach children the right thing. While in the media, we hear all these narratives, that if your child is going homeschool, maybe they're not learning the best. If your child is this, so there's different little things that are being done to water down the effectiveness that family has on children, that biblical studies have on children, that raising children the right way, teaching the difference between right and wrong. It's all of these things that tie together that our society is losing, I think, because the narratives in the media or the people who don't love our country, I'll say, are
Yeah.
using to water down things that have a positive effect on our children.
Right. No, that's exactly right. And look, to be clear, there's a lot of, when I say broken homes, a lot of people automatically assume that I'm talking about divorced families. Look,
Exactly.
there's
We're not
some
talking about exactly.
awesome, no, there's some families out there, many that I know of, who the parents are divorced and the stepdad is a way better father, or the
Yeah,
step
right. Exactly. Yeah.
boyfriend, if you want to call it. They're
Mhm.
they're present, they're there. I mean, you can have families that are the model perfect family, have both parents at home, and they're horrible parents. They're
And that's
absentee
why
parents.
and that's why I said, look, I mean, there's gonna be families that have divorce, and I'm not condemning anybody with that at
That's
all.
right.
I'm simply saying that there's a lot of other aspects that have crippled the parents, both parents, whether, like I said, the boyfriend or the stepfather, it cripples them from doing the right thing for their children as a society instead
Yep.
of allowing parents to be parents, whether they're divorced or together. That's what's hurting our society, I
It
think.
it can actually be your own, I guess, your own culture sometimes.
Right.
I'm just
Exactly.
looking at the in the table of contents, chapter 18. Cho, if you'll remember, Cho is the guy who shot up Virginia Tech. Was one of the worst mass shootings, if you want to call it that, in history for quite some time. Cho actually came from a family that was the family was broken in way different ways, and it all stemmed from a cultural background. There were Korean families, and they came over here from Korea. Well, the mom was getting old for a bride in Korea, and it was basically an arranged marriage. Cho's mom and dad married. The dad was much older than the mom, and it was simply an arranged marriage. She didn't even want to marry the guy, but she was like, because of my culture, I need to go ahead and marry him. So there was
Right.
no
Exactly.
love
Yeah.
between these two. And then in that Korean culture, the men are considered the breadwinners and the true leaders of every family. I'm not saying that. So any of your female viewers
Exactly.
out there,
No,
I don't want
yeah.
them to. It's in their culture that they look at it like that. And Cho's sister, who was a little bit older than him, he was always a very muted person, literally and figuratively. He didn't speak very well. He had trouble putting his words out there. But his sister was one of these Princeton people. I think she had offers from Princeton and Harvard and all that kind of stuff. So
Right.
here she is blowing the doors off of everything, and Cho's over here, the male and the kid in the family, just pathetic, making bad grades and doing all that. So the dad looked down on him. The dad, from a cultural standpoint, he never got along. I would say maybe he loved the kid, but he never showed any love to the kid because culturally he was a huge disappointment. So that's a good example of a broken home where I guess if you looked at it on paper, it's a perfect marriage, but really it
Exactly.
wasn't. The child was actually the one that took some of the hits there. And again, that didn't make him shoot a bunch of people at Virginia Tech. It's a piece of it.
Well, and like we're talking about, it's not only families, it's everything that's being diluted by society.
Oh yeah.
The narratives are telling us what's right, what's wrong, that's bad, this is acceptable, and
Yep.
it's little bitty cuts. It's a death by a thousand cuts, if
That's
you
right.
will.
No,
I don't want
you make a good point on that. One of the things that I do point out in the book also is the very fact that not only the media but the federal government has really incentivized, especially mothers, to not get married and
right.
to have as many children as you can, to be baby farms, so to speak.
Mhm.
And I have a section in a chapter in here that is an awesome example. Man, I had to dig hard to find this example because I remembered it was out there and I'd heard it, but I couldn't find it. But it essentially describes a woman who has a job making 60 or $70,000 a year, like goes on to really improve herself and make good money and all that. And the other woman who can take a job making $20,000 a year, and at the end of the year, the one making $40,000 more brings home less because the other lady is incentivized through having children out of wedlock
Right.
to not have a husband. She makes $200 more a year, making $20,000 to $40,000 less a year than the other lady. Our government should not be incentivizing these people not to work and to spit out as many kids as they can.
You bring up an excellent point, and it's kind of, that was, I think, was the best point that we made, having taken the long way to get there. But government has incentivized not having a father in the home through the
Yep,
welfare system,
that's right.
and that was one of the things that destroyed the black family, for instance. Now, while I'm sure you can agree with this, it's the statistics show it's more white males doing the mass shootings, and that, so this might not seem like a relevant point to make with black families, but it actually, affects white families as much, but they don't make as big of a deal out of it as they do black families. They keep, the narrative is that the black family is the one that they don't get married and they're paid to have kids. But the welfare system affects white families also. And if you look statistically, there's more white families on welfare in some areas than there are black families.
Right.
And because that same policy exists, whether you're white or black, it still takes the father out of the home.
That's right.
You can only get welfare if you don't have a father in the home. I have a friend of mine. She's a radio host in Texas, and she refers to them. She goes over this policy too. She refers to the men who don't marry women as Mr. Lucky, because the mothers will have a Mr. Lucky because he provides extra income, but they don't get married because of the welfare system.
Right.
With
Right.
the welfare system, if our government was smart, we would incentivize marriage, if you will. Maybe not, hey, we're going to pay you. Oh, wait, they do in the tax system, right?
Right.
But it doesn't help. It'll help more families that are making more money than it helps families that are in poverty. And
Right.
that's the families where a lot of these crimes are coming from.
That's right. Yeah. I
You
mean,
know,
there's no question that if our government was not involved in family making, so to speak, that everybody would be, of course, I mean, what area of society can you find that the government doesn't screw up when they get involved? So, I mean, it's just
exactly,
another example.
exactly. So what are some of the big takeaways from this book that will really open some people's eyes?
I hope, and believe it or not, I don't just identify what I think the problems are. I actually identify a ton of what I think solutions are. There are things out there that I think we can get a better handle on all these, and it's almost always younger people who are shooting up these schools and all that kind of stuff. I point out a lot of these kids' backgrounds and how things evolved, and it's I mean, it's undeniable when you look at what all they've done.
Right.
And in many cases, there are ways that we could have spotted all this. Again, how many times did you hear, oh, yeah, we saw that coming? How many times did somebody fall through the crack? This kid, Devin, out there in San Antonio, excuse me, not San Antonio, in Texas area near San Antonio, who went
Uvalde?
into that. No, not Uvalde. It was a couple years ago. I forget Devin. Shoot, I know his name's in here. Devin Kelly. He was the Air Force guy that got out. He lives in that New Braunfels area,
Oh
and he
yeah,
shot all
yeah.
the people in that church.
I
That's the
remember
one
that.
where
Yeah.
Stephen Williford ran across the street and shot him with his own AR-15. Well, this guy could not have been more present on a radar screen. And again, I identified in the book, this guy beat his stepson. I think his stepson was maybe a year or two old, beat him so badly that fractured his skull, and the doctor said he should have died. Um, Beat his wife up, beat a dog up out in the yard, punching it. Neighbors all
Mm,
reported that. This
mm.
guy had every single kind of thing identifiable to prevent him from purchasing a gun. I'm a very strong advocate on just as a side note that felons should get their constitutional rights back if they've served their time and they're not violent criminals. This guy was a violent criminal. The Air Force kicks him out of the Air Force. He goes and kills all these people in the church. They successfully sue the Air Force. The federal government had to pay a ton of money to these families who had people killed in this church because the Air Force never sent in all of his violent beating paperwork to
Oh
the
wow.
NICS system for background checks because guess what? The lieutenant that was in charge of all that didn't know that was his job. We could have prevented this guy from at least made it a little bit harder for him to get a
Yeah.
gun. He just strolled into a store and bought a gun. He should have been denied. So it's
Well,
stuff like that where you look at
it
that.
it's like the shooter in Lafayette many years ago that he was on, on the ban list for guns, but he actually went to Mississippi and was able to circumvent it by going to Mississippi.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
and crossing state lines. So what other big things are you pointing out in here? I remember that you said that there's actually, when you talk about the politicians, they're not trying to stop the mass shootings.
No, I mean, again, I'm not ashamed to hurt people's feelings, but I still always feel like I need to put that disclaimer out there. because I don't want to hurt good people's feelings. The bad people, they're outed in here. I mentioned, again, all backed up by data and points that you can go and investigate and research yourself, how much money these organizations, not just the Everytowns and the anti-gun, I mean, these anti-gun companies don't make anything. They make panic, but they don't make a thing. They buy t-shirts and sell them. They sell bumper stickers and all that. And they're multi-million dollar organizations. You don't become million and billionaire organizations by selling t-shirts and bumper stickers. It's because of
Right.
membership. They stoke those flames when people are killed. They can say whatever they want. I know deep down inside, they may not high five each other openly, but in their minds, when there's a quote mass shooting, they're happy about it because it's a
Oh yeah.
fundraising opportunity for them. But I've actually got some information here. Again, all of this is stuff that anybody can go look at. And Bernie Sanders in 2020 made 1 point something million dollars from these anti-gun groups. These they always talk about the NRAs and everybody else that is lobbying out there about how they're paying politicians. These politicians are making tons of money on the anti-gun
Yep.
side.
Oh
It's
yeah.
just that we don't fight the fight the same way they fight the fight. So we don't talk about that stuff. But these people don't want these mass shootings to go away. They make
No.
way too much money off of these things for them to go away.
Well, and they're making it on both sides.
Yep.
The pro gun politicians, get the gun lobbyists and the gun manufacturers to go in there and push pro gun legislation through more. And then the anti gun people did the same thing for the anti gun people too.
Yeah.
They work both sides of the fence.
Yeah.
And that's what aggravates me the most, because when you look at what's doing to our country, it's splitting us up when we could actually unite on more than what we realize. I'm going to ask you a side question. Have you ever read the Second Amendment Primer by Les Adams?
No.
Oh, wow. All right. I'm glad that I'm getting to share with you then. You need to read the book, The Second Amendment Primer by Les Adams.
Okay.
He goes into the history of the Second Amendment. He goes back to before Christ when it comes to our rights to own guns and self-defense.
Okay.
Do you have it? Do you have a lot of information on self-defense in here?
There's some, but this book was mainly about what are the causes and what do I see the solutions as being. So most of that is in there. There's a little bit about self-defense in there, but the book is certainly not centered around that.
So let's talk about your solutions that you have in this book that people can read if they get it.
Okay.
Which, by the way, I got your legallyarmedamerica.com's rolling at the bottom.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to tell you just some really, so I don't go into too much and bore everybody out there. Chapter, which is it? 15 is what we can do. I'm just going to tell you the top points that I see here. Be a better parent, friend, neighbor, and teacher. I think that is the golden rule, is a good way to live our life. And believe it or not, it can actually have a major impact on all that kinds of stuff. What I mentioned is changes in behavior. Our kids, we understand they're going through puberty and all kinds of other stuff as teenagers, but you have to look at those really different changes of behavior. Like, did they all of a sudden start being cruel to animals?
Yeah.
Did they or were they wearing a certain type of clothes and all of a sudden it's a completely different look for them? They dressed in all black. I'm not saying that the emo people are the problem. I'm saying if suddenly they're wearing the rainbow colored clothes and all of a sudden the next day it's all black. Fingernails black, hair dyed black. If you see a massive change like that, it's probably worth talking about. Not that there's something wrong with it, but these are major changes in this kid's life. What changed? It may be just, I've gone through those phases too. So it's not like something made me. Just I ran with a different crew of kids. Trust your instincts. That's a big one that I have. I tell anybody this all the time, and it's not just in this types of setting with this book. A lot of times we get gut feelings. And they're a lot of times are right. When you feel like something's not right, go talk to your child about it. And I know it's not comfortable for everybody to do, but I think that we have to do that. I mean, a side note on that is we can't all be our kids' best friends. Some people want to be their kids' best friends. It's great to be close with your kid, but you also have to be their parent at the same time. Oversee tech interaction. That's one of the biggest points right now that I see, is that we have to monitor somehow their electronic footprint, that, if you will, online. I mean, there's so much going on, and I mean for their own protection. I mean, there's so much child trafficking going on in this world right now. There's so many things we could do by keeping a close watch on our children's foot out there. They're going on whatever you want. We might have lost. There, we're back.
Yeah, we're back there.
Don't be afraid to
But you
intervene. Work to gain our kids' trust. Just a number of different things.
But you know what though, Paul? I'll usually say this when it comes to some of the problems in our society, where you're honing in on the gun, violence that results from the problems in our society. And I don't know that it. I mean, of course, I do think there's certain aspects of the video games that are a problem or a source of problems to make kids do bad things, like the violent video games. However, I think it comes down to just a lack of communication. Because when you
Yeah.
go back 20 years, a generation ago, we communicated more with each
Yeah.
other.
We
We
did.
were always more aware of each other. If your child did something wrong, that neighbor down the street is likely to grab him by the ear and say, "We're going to your mom." Now
Right.
that child doesn't even come outside because he's playing video games.
That's
Not the
right.
video games are making a bad influence, but the lack of communication, the
Yeah.
lack of communicating with your fellow man. You
Yep.
become isolated and you
That's right.
lose that sense of not only communication, but you lose that sense of morality.
Yeah.
When we're talking to each other and dealing with other people, a lot of things come out of that communication. Compassion. You when you're connected to your fellow man on a more daily basis, you're going to have less chance to want to hurt them.
Yeah.
When you're always watching the video games, especially the ones that are violent, you're not being compassionate or considerate with your fellow man as much as you are when you're always having to communicate with them.
Correct.
So there might be a kind of a roundabout way,
Yeah.
but I love your ideas for solutions. There was something you told me there in Lafayette when you first told me about your book, when you talked about some of the nefarious plans that people have using guns, not just in the mass shootings, but in their path to try to get guns banned or outlawed or the removal of our Second Amendment. Do you remember what that was?
I don't. Refresh my memory a little bit more on that.
Well, I think it was more that there's a nefarious plan by some groups to use guns in these mass shootings to be able to get us closer to having them banned.
I don't know if I remember that part of the conversation, William. I do apologize.
No,
I
that's all
do.
right. No, it's all right. It's okay. Because your book is sound, and I'm just telling people because I've read parts of it and the highlights of it, and I'm gonna tell you I couldn't. It's like I couldn't get through it fast enough. I was like, wait,
Yeah.
I'm looking at the highlights of it, and that in itself told me a lot of what I need to know about how society is not watching and how I know what it was. It's how a lot of our elected officials and other people ignore what's going on in our society that could normally stop gun violence.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in general, a lot of these politicians, first of all, for anybody to think that politicians can be the ones who would, quote, stop mass shootings is kind of ignorant anyway,
Yeah,
because
exactly right.
they don't. I mean, I know there's a lot of, and this is sad to say, there's a lot of very weak-minded people out there, a lot of group thinkers that do allow the media and politicians to get them to live their lives a certain way. It's very sad that we have so many group thinkers out there and people who will not think for themselves, whether it's laziness or whatever. I don't know what you want to call it, but it is a thing, right?
Let's talk a little bit about your being the director. I want to switch a little bit because I
Okay.
think that your book is magnificent, and I think that people just really need to dive into this to get more of some of what we're talking about out of it. But how did you get involved with Gun Owners of America, and how did you and you became the director of the Louisiana operation of it? How did you get involved with that? How long have you been involved with that?
I've actually only been their director for 1 year. But what was kind of unusual is I seemed to run in side by side with the old director all the time. In other words, I would take it upon myself to go to the state capitol whenever we had gun bills that were being discussed. I didn't need an organization to prod me and ask me to go. I was going anyway on behalf of me.
Right.
So I just
Yeah.
went ahead. I was already involved in that respect. So I know a lot of the politicians in the state of Louisiana already. And I just over the years, I used to be what you would call a what was the phrase that they used? An NRA news partner. 10 years ago, I was an NRA news partner. So when I first started Legally Armed America, they had reached out to me and said, look, we like your content. Can we share some of your content? And in return, you share some of our relevant stuff on your networks too. I said, yeah, sure. Well, that was back when the NRA had a really good reputation, or at least a much more positive reputation. The NRA did a really good job of hiding a lot of the negative stuff about them, but the advent and advancement of the internet allows people to find out more stuff. And of course, more of the corruption in the NRA came to light. Now, I'm still a life member of the NRA. I've not disowned them. I've not,
Right.
said I'm walking away from it. And the
I
main
don't agree
reason
with I don't agree with all the Republicans, but I'm still a
no,
member of the Republican Party.
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I truly in my heart feel like if there were only one pro-gun organization out there like Gun Owners of America or like the NRA, they can't fight the fight themselves. They would get trounced.
Mhm.
They all do good work, even the ones that I don't know, never been a part of, or anything like that. I may not agree with the way some of the other ones do things, but we still need them. The NRA disagree with a lot that they do. I especially can't stand that top level being so top heavy. Absolutely can't stand that. Well, I watched how Gun Owners of America carried themselves over the years, just kind of seeing them. Was a member of theirs because I try to be a member to many of these out there. And I just noticed how they always were kind of the tip of the spear. They may not have been the most heavily funded, which they're pretty big now. I
Yeah,
believe 2 or
exactly.
3 million members they've got. They always were there. They were always at the front of the line. They were always the ones being respectful, not being crazy, not trying to be belligerent, but always saying, no, that's not constitutional. We're not doing that. And
Exactly.
I noticed that Gun Owners of America never wavered. I watched the NRA on various small things, whether it be bump stocks, whether it be just the mention of red flag gun laws, kind of not speak up. Not that they supported those things,
Right.
but they didn't speak up in opposition to
Exactly.
them being banned. And I had a problem with that, where Gun Owners of America always seemed to be out there like, no, this is not right. You can't do that.
It's
And
almost like the NRA sometimes tries to be political, even though they
yes,
have they're two separate arms. A lot of people realize the NRA is the NRA, but the
yep,
NRILA is the activist side
that's
of
right.
it. And
That's
a
right.
lot of people don't that from what I see, sometimes I think the NRA reacts to some of this stuff in a way that the political arm is pushing so as not to give the NRA a bad name.
Yeah,
It's like, and whereas Gun Owners of America tend to say, look, if this issue is coming up, we're going to speak our mind regardless of the outcome, so to speak. But the NRA does says, wait, everybody's after us, so we're going to be a little bit more political about
right.
this one and not say a word because we don't want to get shut down more than they're already trying to shut us down.
That's right. No, that's exactly right. I just feel like Gun Owners of America has done things the right way. And when they approached me last January to ask if I would be their state director for Louisiana, didn't take much for me to decide that I would do it. So,
Right,
I
I
mean,
love it.
I'm glad to be part of what those guys are doing. Very proud of the organization. And still to this date, I've never seen anything that would make me not want to be a member of them.
I love that. Yeah, I'm learning more about them. I'm not a member yet, so we're gonna have to talk about that.
Hey, if you want to
You
be
know,
a member, I will say this, and I get no money from this. They actually, I asked them to do this. One of the things that my YouTube channel that I've really tried to stress is that I I want to provide a way that viewers can save some money by interacting with me. And one of the links that I have at the top of the description on almost every single one of my videos out there is a link to join Gun Owners of America. And instead of a $25 membership, it's 20 bucks. And I really, when I first got involved with Gun Owners of America, I was like, look, I got to be able to offer, I want people to sign up, but I got to give them a break because I want
Right.
them to feel like they're coming through me and they're getting something out of it.
Exactly.
And I know it's only $5, but it's still, I mean, it's a 25%, I mean, a 20% savings, you know, on your,
Right.
on what your membership is. So I'm very proud of that they do have a link. I think if you go, it's like gunowners.org/LAA or something like that. But again, the link's in all of my videos on YouTube. And if you click on that, I get nothing from that. The $5 that you save, I'm not getting that. It doesn't come to me. There's nothing, anything like that. It's simply money that I look at it this way. It's money that that person can save to go buy ammo, a gun, maybe get their permit, whatever they need to do.
Sometimes it's just the goodwill aspect of it that
Yeah,
makes people feel like, okay, look, they respect the fact that I came from this, from whatever wherever to be a member of this, and it's just that goodwill aspect of it that makes a
sure.
big difference,
That's
on
right.
some people. So, were you able to use a lot of the information that you learned from the Capitol to on your book, or was the book just an independent inspiration, if you will?
Yeah, definitely nothing politically I used in the book. In fact, the book was out before I became the director for Gun Owners of America. I this was just something that I worked on and had actually had to make myself go ahead and write it. I mean, it's funny because I can totally relate. I mentioned that the last sentence in one of the paragraphs in the book is that, oh, by the way, I'm ADHD.
Okay.
So I want people to know that I'm not bagging on people who have
Right.
attention problems. That's me growing up. I've been like that
Exactly.
my
Right.
entire life.
Exactly.
So I want people to understand that, hey, I get it. I understand. But that was something that I knew that if I didn't make myself write the book, I had everything in my head. I'd done all the research, bought all the books, read all the books. And
But
in April,
you've got all the right parts. You not only have you may be ADHD, but you have a respect for law. You
yeah,
have
that's right.
and it's probably how you were raised. You were surrounded by people who did that. Now again, it goes back to what's wrong with our society is that we're so alienated, not necessarily because of social media, but social media has made us antisocial.
Yeah,
So we're not teaching each other right from wrong. We're not teaching each other laws. Like I said, back in the day when you did bad, your neighbor would give you the spanking.
right,
We're
right.
not learning how to be regular humans and compassionate people.
Yep,
We're learning how to be woke and how to use wokeness as a way to point out what the other guy is doing wrong, but we're not able to use our own conscience because we don't have enough communication skills with other people. And that's how, look, back in the day before they had books, you taught each other through not woke, through the spoken word.
mhm,
That's how you taught each other was through the spoken word, through rote, or is it wrote? Is it rote communication or written
mhm,
communication? I don't have the right word. Somebody's gonna send me a comment later and say the right word is
right,
this,
right.
but we don't have that level of communication to teach each other through the spoken word instead of on writing or apps or whatever the case may be.
Yeah,
But there again, you have a sense of morality, a sense of legality, and a sense of family. So you don't let your ADHD get in the way either.
right, right.
What are your videos about?
I've got my videos are a plethora of stuff. I mean, I'll do current event type stuff. There's a rampage shooting or something like that. I will typically cover that. I like to delve into the things that are kind of injustices to people. Here recently, UPS being trying to bully companies out there that want to ship firearms and stuff like that. So, I mean, I try to cover pretty much everything. Yeah, I've done gun reviews and I still do gun reviews. The problem with gun reviews is that that's one of the things that YouTube has used to demonetize and knock our channels down. And if you did just gun reviews out there, you would not exist anymore because it'd be pointless to do that. I mean, I know people would like to think that we all do these videos just out of the goodness of our heart because we want everybody to see them, but there has to be a business aspect to it at some point, or else you're
Like
spinning your
mine
wheels.
right now with the WWFA to get
Yeah,
66% off,
I
which
mean,
I'm gonna have some ideas for you. Do you have a Rumble page?
I think I still have one. When I started it out, it was extremely cumbersome. I think they've streamlined it a little bit because a lot of
It's
people have told me to.
extremely streamlined,
Okay.
and you should definitely check into it because I do everything on Rumble now.
Okay.
I do everything on Rumble now because with YouTube banning a lot of my content and taking my videos down, I do everything on Rumble. Let's talk a little. I know as we wrap up here in the next few minutes or the next little bit, what are some of the three or four? I know there's more than that, and you're welcome to do more than that. There's a lot of gun laws that are happening behind the scenes, not being done by Congress, but being done by the bureaucracies. I know that we're always hearing a lot of stories about the ATF nowadays. They're coming down on a lot of the gun businesses. We've got they're trying to get rid of the arm brace. It's being done through an ATF I'm gonna say mandate. You know what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
But are there what laws are on your mind that are not being made out in the public that you think we have to be more aware of?
Well, anything the ATF does in general, I wish more, because I feel like the ATF somehow has been given the authority that they don't deserve and they truly don't have constitutionally. And that's always bothered me. A lot of the things they're doing, whether it be the bump stock issues, I think the Bruin decision is going to strike down a ton of the stuff that the ATF is trying to push through. Um, the oh gosh, the brace thing you talked about, they're going to put families out on the street by doing that. A totally senseless thing. Braces are not, there's not a spike in crime because braces are available out there.
Exactly. Right.
It's simply because they have found, and if they want to call it a loophole, they can. But the ATF approved every single brace that's on the market today, and then decided that they don't need to be legal anymore.
Well, now that
That's
now they
not
want to
right.
now they want to serial number them.
Yeah, well, everything. I mean, look, and this, don't get me started on the whole serial number thing, because knowing where something was made and who bought it is worthless unless you have a registry for that. So when you tell me that you want a serial number on a gun, you are telling me that you want to be able to track that gun for its life,
Right.
because that's the only usable thing for a serial number. Having serial numbers on guns doesn't solve crimes.
Right.
Criminals do stupid things, but criminals are not
Exactly.
stupid. They do not drop guns that they went down to Academy or wherever, fill out a
Right.
4473, and then drop it at the crime scene. It just
Right.
doesn't happen.
It
I
doesn't.
mean,
It
let's
doesn't.
face it. So that's the kind of stuff that bothers me, that we're doing this for the betterment of helping the FBI solve crimes. Show me some crimes they've solved. Show me some. I've had guns
Exactly.
stolen from me. The only time a serial number I feel like has ever been useful is if they ever want to track that gun and they discover it, recover it, and they want to give it back to me. And I would be willing to bet that 80 to 90% of guns that are stolen out there never find their way back to the rightful owner. You can't tell me they don't wind up at crimes and things like that. So
Right.
the only benefit I could see of a serial number is even useless. What I use serial numbers for, me personally, is to keep a log of my collection. I have a logbook. I know what all the things are. So when I pass away, somebody has some idea of what I own and what the value of them are. But as far as solving crimes, that's a totally stupid argument that they continue to throw out there, and people just, take it hook, line, and sinker. So yeah, the ATF. I know some people with the ATF. I know a lot of my viewers will sit there and say, "Oh, nobody good works for the ATF." That's not true. That
Right.
It's not fair to generalize like that and say that one organization has all bad people that work there. But the
Right.
good people who I know who work for the ATF, I have tried to convince them to leave. I'm like, you don't fit there. You need to get out of that place.
Well, it's no different than I'm gonna say the military. I just did an interview about an hour ago with a gentleman. We were going over talking about all of the veterans that are locked up in jail for crimes in Afghanistan and Iraq when they're being convicted of things like murder when they were defending themselves against an enemy combatant in a war zone, and now we're finding that a lot of these guys have been convicted. You have it from witnesses that are also veterans that were,
Hmm.
maybe trying to cop a lower plea deal, or they're following orders from higher up, and their convictions are coming at a time when a politician needs a narrative for whatever reason. It doesn't mean that organization's bad. It just means that there's a few bad apples,
That's right.
in it. We talked about in our video about Calvin Gibbs, who's in sitting in jail for the last 12 years, and when he was convicted of something that of killing somebody when he was defending himself when he was being fired upon by an enemy combatant, and the people that witnessed him defending his patrol were not allowed to testify on his behalf.
Hmm.
And that's just a microcosm of the story.
Right,
So
right.
to your point, there's always gonna be a bad apple someplace.
Yeah,
It doesn't mean that the whole organization is bad. And I
yeah.
get it. I commend the ATF for doing the good things that they do. I just don't like the power grab that bureaucrats try to get in a bureaucracy that's so big and so huge that they can get away with it.
My biggest problem with the ATF, in all honesty, isn't even with them, it's with our politicians. Our politicians are a bunch of
Right.
cowards, and they have willingly given that authority and that quote power to the ATF to legislate on their behalf through a bureaucracy because they don't have the guts to take on some of these fights on their own and
Yep.
say no to an anti-gun bill. They feel like, oh, if I say no to that stupid anti-gun bill, no matter how unconstitutional it is, there might be 10 people who won't vote for me. I mentioned that on all my videos when it comes to politicians, that's why I think phone calls matter to politicians, because while they may not care about my Second Amendment rights, one thing scares the hell out of them, and that's not being reelected. They love the
Oh,
gravy
yeah.
train and the power that they
Exactly.
have. And when you threaten that power of not being reelected, you get their attention. And that's where I feel
Paul,
like it makes a difference.
you've made an excellent point. I have to thank you for because of this. I always talk about how one of the biggest problems with our country's government right now is is the levels of bureaucracy, and how these different levels of bureaucracy are creating, I don't, not laws, but they're creating rules and regulations and mandates within them that we, the people, are having to abide by,
Yeah.
but we did not elect them to be in office to make the rules and regulations that we're having to live by. And you just made a great point to say that I've never made this connection where it's not like they're doing it themselves. They're being given the authority, be it a wink and a nod, be it a slight nod of the head, be it a written mandate, whatever the case may be, that elected officials don't want to make certain laws themselves because they won't get reelected. Instead, they kind of find a way to pass it off to
Yeah.
to the bureaucrats to do that, and they're the bad guy now.
That's right.
And like you said, not all of them are bad,
Right.
but when you're faced with, you know, working someplace for 19 years and you're a year away from getting your retirement
Right.
and, you know, uh, retirement and medical and vacation and sick days and whatever, you might go, yeah, I'll ask for serial numbers on bump stocks. It's not really a bad thing. And I
Right.
retire next year anyway.
Yep.
Is
Well, I
that the
mean, I'm going
case?
to use Marco Rubio for an instance. Marco Rubio is a supporter of red flag gun laws. He knows that he could never get reelected if he came out stronger. He's already come out in favor of them, but he got tremendous blowback. So he's one of those kind of guys that can hide behind the ATF and secretly go, hey, guys, I'm not going to interfere. Red flag gun laws, do what you want to do. And then stand back with the voters in Florida and go, man, it's not my problem. That's Biden's ATF. I don't have anything to do with that.
Exactly.
When he does, he could get involved in that. He could stop those things, but they don't want to stop those things.
They have a great way of skirting that responsibility, don't they?
Absolutely, they
I'm a
do. Yes,
strong Second Amendment supporter. I didn't do anything to take away your gun rights. Oh yeah, well you did nothing to help protect our gun
that's
right,
exactly
our
right.
gun rights either. What are some of the worst gun laws that are coming out right now that are, or are there any? Like you said, the Bruin law, the Bruin decision that's a good thing. Is that the one that was saying that that no, not having a serial number on a gun was not illegal?
No, the serial number ruling that came down last week, that was in a district court, so that doesn't affect anybody federally right now. I think that might have been West Virginia. So it's just in that district over there right now. In fact, there's still things that are going to go on with that. I think that's a good move in the right direction, but that's not a federal thing. Bruin was actually the one where they went in there and struck down essentially people having the right to, or not struck down, but supported people having the right to carry a gun in some of these, if you want to call them gun-free zones or whatever like that. State of New York, Maryland, California, they have these may issue laws for concealed carry, for instance, Where Louisiana, as you know, we have a shall issue. If you qualify for that permit, which I still don't agree with permits, I think everybody should be able to carry without having to pay for a permit. So
Constitutional carry.
don't get me mixed up in that. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I feel like every state should have at least more rights than what they have. In the state of Louisiana, you know, as long as I qualify for that permit and don't have a criminal record, they have to give it to me. Even if the sheriff or somebody doesn't like me or doesn't like my political stance, they still have to give me that
Yeah,
permit.
exactly.
Where you have New York, California, it's a may issue. Do you meet the standards and qualifications? Now, can you have something any more open-ended than that? That the standards of or good standing or whatever. Who are you to judge my moral character? You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah,
I mean, how do I?
Exactly right.
Yeah. So I mean that's where Bruin came in and said, no. You have to give if these people qualify, you have to give them that right to carry that firearm. And the cool thing was that Judge Thomas or Justice Thomas, he actually wrote in there that the old standard that they used to judge gun laws in the past was out the door, that now you had to use text and history. So if it wasn't written in the plain text of the Second Amendment, those 27 words in the Second Amendment, if it's not mentioned in there, then you can't pass a law against it. And if the founding fathers' history of whenever all that took place is not part of the law that you're trying to push, then that's an unconstitutional law. Well, that's going to undo tons of laws that are unconstitutional. The problem with laws, excuse me, and things like this, rulings that are handed down from the Supreme Court, is, as you know, somebody has to be wronged first and go through that court process in order for that ruling to take effect nationwide. So yeah, we're all celebrating because of all this great stuff. And New York immediately came back and passed way more stringent laws. I did a video that was pretty interesting. I'll try to find it and send it to you. I found an interactive map of New York City, and I narrowed it down just for the sake of my video on the island of Manhattan. I took the new law in New York and I went through. You could click different things and it would highlight on their map. I clicked everything that they said, places you could not carry, and it highlighted on the map. And it was essentially the entire island of Manhattan was highlighted. So it was like you people have identified every possible place to where no one can. There were literally little blank areas, spots throughout, but you couldn't get to that spot.
And you know, that's a microcosm of our legal system and the laws and the legislative laws that we have in our states, in our country, where there are always the unintended consequences. You know, you might have a law today and they'll pass another law 10 years from now that they conflict with each other, but they don't clean it up. They don't do a cleanup bill. They do sometimes, but they don't take the old one off the books. And now you got these laws that conflict with each other, no different than what you're saying there, where, you know, you might be able to carry concealed in one place, but next door you can't. So you might be having lunch in one place, but you can't go have ice cream in the other. Of course, I'm pulling that out of my rear just to make the point. You know, but man, well, Paul, what else? Is there anything else you might want to bring up before we start closing out here?
Man, not really. I mean, I've just staying super busy, and I appreciate you giving me the time to talk to your viewers. And you know, anytime I can get the word out, I mean, this book is near and dear to my heart. You know, it's one of those kind of things where I put a lot of work into it. I made it a point to so that no one else could have any control over this. I paid for, I edited, I published, and I distribute this book all myself. No one has a hand in it. So nobody can tell me what I can or can't do with this book or what I can or can't say in the book. And I intend to write other books. And that's my goal, is that as long as I can still financially afford to do all this on my own. I know my book's not getting in other places that a lot of people's are. My book's never going to be in Books A Million or Barnes and Noble or whatever, but that's okay. Because
you might make more money that way though too.
I probably do, because I will tell you this. One person from a publishing company actually came to me and told me, you don't want your books in these big box stores because they make you sell the book to them at such a ridiculous discount. And that if you don't sell enough copies, they make you buy them back at the value of the book that they were going to sell it at. So you stand up this money on your own book if you send them to these big box stores. So, I mean, this book is not going to be popular to the average person who might be walking through Barnes and Nobles or whatever. So I like where I'm at. I hit a lot of these, like the NRA show, SHOT Show, I sell a lot of my books online. So my goal is to continue to do exactly what I'm doing the way I'm doing it, because I'm not setting the world on fire. I'm not going to get rich doing any of this, but at the same time, I like I like how I'm doing all this, and
You're
the
passionate about getting good information out there, getting valuable information out there that protects not only our Second Amendment right, but maybe helps add some pieces to the puzzle that's going to help build the bridges that I know I'm kind of speaking to the same things there, but it's going to help complete that puzzle that's going to bring more people together and solve some problems while at the same time helping our communities go forward in a way where we can actually reduce crime.
That's right. Yep, absolutely.
Well, Paul, after I close this out here on Facebook, I'm gonna talk to you offline here for a few
Okay.
minutes, and we'll go from there. But I want to thank you so much for being on here again. How to Make a Monster is your book, and it's legallyarmedamerica.com. Correct? Is that it? Legallyarmedamerica.com.
They can they can actually yeah, they can go to straight to howtomakeamonster.com to get the book. They don't have to go to Legally Armed America.
Okay, so either one there to get a copy of your book, and this show can be found on podcasts on all podcast apps. I'll have it posted on Rumble. Please share it, everybody. Thank y'all so much for watching, and have a great day.